Hello and welcome to Boxing Tonight, or should it be Exhibition Tonight, Farce Tonight, who knows. What this is, regardless, our preview of Mike Tyson's return to the ring against Roy Jones Jr. I'm Martin Dorman, joined by Rich Jones again. Please do give the video a thumbs up. Please do subscribe to our channel. So, it really is happening in Los Angeles tonight. Mike Tyson back after a 15-year absence against Roy Jones Jr., who last fought just a couple of years ago, 105 years old combined. It is at heavyweight, obviously. Rachel, let me just start with what are you hoping from, if that's the right word, tonight? Because we both understand, and most boxing fans understand, this could be horrendous. And nobody really is treating it like a serious fight, but it is intriguing. So what do you wake up tomorrow morning? What do you hope has happened in the fight?
First of all, just hope they both come out of it safe and that no one's sort of seriously hurt. And then second of all, just hope it doesn't descend into complete farce in terms of like the confusion over the rules and like, because obviously there's been so many whisperings about what's allowed, what isn't allowed. They've said that people now can be knocked out. There will be a winner. I think as successful as we can hope for really is something that resembles like a contest and isn't, because like obviously they're not going to be at the level they were at when they were fighting at the highest level. Obviously this isn't going to be a top class boxing match, but if we can get a fight where both of them look okay, one of them wins on points, no one gets seriously hurt, and it's not a complete sort of watered down sort of shambles, and I think that's about as successful as you can ask for, really. Is that what you're sort of hoping for as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you mentioned the rules. Let's just clarify where I think we're at now. So the fight is sanctioned by the California State Athletic Commission, but they have said all along that it's basically to showcase the skills of two legends, which they undoubtedly are. So basically a glorified sparring session. There would be no knockdowns, no winner. And if either of them were to be cut, the fight would be stopped. The referee could step in if it got too violent, which just in itself is nonsensical given it is a fight. But the WBC obviously got involved because, well, why wouldn't they? They've created a belt, obviously. And they've got three former champions judging the fight, scoring the fight remotely. So 8 rounds, 2-minute rounds, again, sort of hints at it being an exhibition, but these three girls will judge the fight. So there will be a winner. And now, the thing is, I don't even know if it will be announced because it might be that the referee doesn't necessarily, or the MC doesn't necessarily announce it as in normal boxing, but that the WBC somehow announced it remotely. So I don't even know how the winner will be announced, but I think there will be a winner announced and they'll get a nice pointless belt. In terms of what I want to see, like, it's a fight, so I want to see action. And I want, like, Roy Jones Jr., as I said, did fight up until 2018, but his punch resistance kind of went towards the end of his career. So if Mike Tyson can land, can he do some damage? I mean, you'd like to think he could. And certainly his training videos look great, but then everyone can look good in the gym. I'll be honest, I want to see a knockout. I do. I want to see somebody on the canvas, and most likely that will be Roy Jones Jr. Not hurt, obviously. But if I'm going to watch a fight, or there's going to be a fight on, then I want to see it resemble a fight. But it's just, you can't honestly 100% say what's going to happen because you've no idea what they're going to look like. And also they're selling it. It's £20 over here on BT Sport pay-per-view. It's $50 in the States. So of course they're going to say they'll do this, that, and the next thing. But I just wouldn't be surprised if that's all talk as usual and they go in there and just tap each other around the ears a couple of times and then.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? Is what mindset Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. are going into it with. Is Mike Tyson going into this as a kind of unfinished business, like itching to get back in the ring, like obviously he's sort of been through his troubles. He's had such a like sort of crazy life. Is he sort of feeling like is it almost like, is it a big deal for him in terms of like a sort of redemption type thing, as in like he wants to go in the ring and sort of knock someone out one more time? Or is it a case of, what I suspect it is it's just a way to make some money for both of them, and in that case they're just sort of selling it? I think a lot of it depends on what their mindset is going into it, and obviously they're going to sell it as a big fight and they're going to sell it as sort of a big competition. But I think there's a sort of good likelihood that that's sort of just all part of the selling process. It's all bravado, and that in reality it's just a sort of decent way for them both to sort of make some money and you know, put on a bit of a show. But you said that you think it's sort of Roy Jones Jr. that's most likely to be knocked out, but I kind of see it the other way. I mean, I'm not sort of old enough to remember both of them in their primes, but I sort of lean towards thinking, you know, it's all on Roy Jones Jr.'s side. Like you say, his punch resistance had gone, but he was fighting at a decent level not long ago. Mike Tyson hasn't been in the ring for so long. I know Mike Tyson's a naturally bigger man, but, you know, Roy Jones Jr., I sense he's probably got, I don't know, I'd expect him to be in sort of more fight-ready shape. He's been in the ring sort of more recently. I sort of favour him over Tyson, to be honest. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's just one of those that I suppose this is why we're talking about it, because there's so many unknowns over it. There's so much sort of confusion around it. It's kind of, no one really knows what they're going to get. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting as well if it is a success to see what happens in the future, whether it sort of opens the door to more of these old fighters coming out of retirement, because it is one of these sports where you get fighters all the time looking to come out of retirement and sort of talking about it. Oscar De La Hoya's talking about it now, isn't he? Wanting to fight Golovkin and stuff like that. Obviously, Nigel Benn had the fight against Sakio Beaker. He was coming out of retirement until that sort of fell through and never happened. So it's not something I'd be sort of keen on seeing too much of, but it's going to be fascinating because this could sort of, if it goes well, it could sort of open the door to more of those sort of things, or it could just show everyone that there's no sort of interest in it. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting either way. What happens?
You're right. There are parallels, I think, with the sort of YouTube fights as well. Not necessarily in terms of the ability, but when Logan Paul fought KSI for the second time with, you know, smaller gloves, no head guards, everyone was like, oh, you know, maybe what happens if one of them gets knocked out or badly hurt? Or you know, they've trained properly for this. Maybe we'll actually see something. And in the end, it was absolutely dreadful, as you probably could have predicted. You know, they are just too. It's like you and I having a fight. Like there's no reason why they would suddenly be good fighters. And I think this is kind of similar, not in that they're not good fighters, but actually the most likely outcome is that it will just be an exhibition. And if that was all that it was being billed as, then that would be fine. If, you know, listen, Mike Tyson, as you said, has certainly in the last 10 years really turned his life around. He was in a really bad way. Certainly after he retired, he's got, you know, his businesses are thriving. He's clearly in shape. He's lighter than he has been for a fight anyway since 1997 when he fought Evander Holyfield for the second time. You know, so he's definitely in a good place. So if this fight was being billed as simply, listen, these are two legends of the ring, didn't fight in their prime, but they're going to go in there. And exhibitions happen all the time. You know, in football, you've got UNICEF and all those sorts of things. So if they were going to go in there and say, right, money to charity, whatever, we're not going to hurt each other, but that's understood from day one. It's never advertised as a fight. Then that would be okay. That, I think most people would be like, fair enough. You know, what harm can it really do? But because of this confusion over, you know, the extent to which they will actually try and hurt each other and what they can and can't do, there's that more of an intrigue, if you like, as to what could happen. Yeah. But ultimately, I think, you know, we probably will be left disappointed. And then again, it's with the YouTubers. That's really, there's been sort of, well, there was one more in January when Jake Paul fought, and now Jake Paul's on the undercard tonight against, you know, former NBA player Nate Robinson. But again, there was this idea that YouTube boxing was going to take off in a huge way, and it hasn't really, and I don't think it ever really will. So again, you have the questions here in terms of, do we want this to go badly, or at least just be boring, and therefore there are no more? Or if, you know, if there is a knockout, then suddenly Evander Holyfield pops up and says, Tyson, I want the third fight. You know, as I say, it's just really hard to know what's the best outcome for boxing is. And but in my my head says it would just be a boring 8 rounds. It could be a draw. I don't even know if you can get odds anymore because they stopped that a few days ago, but it could definitely just be a boring draw. And then we'll sit here tomorrow and be like, yeah, of course it was. Of course it was.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it reminds me a bit of the old Masters football where they used to sort of bring out the old footballers and stuff, but that was obviously sort of more fun. It was like everyone knew what they were getting with that, whereas this, it's like kind of, it feels a little bit like one of those sort of, like you say, it feels like one of those sort of exhibition type things, but it's being masked as something more competitive and a bit more meaning to it, which is kind of, yeah, it's just a bit sort of, yeah, it's a bit confusing. I'm intrigued to see. I think one of the big things, one of the interesting aspects of it is going to be how well, I mean, we might never know, but it's going to be how well it does sort of from a commercial standpoint, because I don't know how many people are interested enough to sort of stay, especially in the UK, stay up until the early hours, or in America pay the sort of $50 or whatever it costs pay-per-view. I think it's the sort of people with a passing interest of boxing are going to have some intrigue in. Everyone's going to sort of look up the result, look at the scores and stuff, like look what's happened. But are people going to pay the money, tune in, watch it live? I'm not so sure, especially, you know, in the current climate. So yeah, I think ultimately, I think obviously there's been a lot said about it. I think it'll probably turn out to be not the best thing we've ever seen, not the worst thing we've ever seen, and it'll kind of just fade away is what I think or hope will happen, and what I think will probably happen, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think you're also right about people. It is £20, I say, on BT Sport box office. So I don't. Yeah, I think you're right. People probably won't stay up or get up, and then in the morning, they'll want to know the result for sure. And then if it's gone 8 rounds, they'll be like, oh right, fine. And if there's a stoppage, there'll be plenty of clips going around. It's not as if they'll see one clip and think, oh, that looks really good, I must buy the fight retrospectively. But the weigh-in was on YouTube last night, and there were 100,000 people on BT Sports channel watching it. But I guess obviously that was free at 10 p.m. or whatever. I think there's definitely interest, and it may be that BT Sport are just looking at it from a point of view, well, it's a bonus, right? We didn't see this coming at the start of the year. We've missed out on at least one Tyson Fury pay-per-view probably. There hasn't been a Conor McGregor pay-per-view, so they've just thought, well, we'll buy the fight for however much they paid for it, £20, and if enough mugs buy it, then we'll make some money from it.
Yeah, and the thing is, if it does sort of flop and they don't, like, there's no sort of like long-term damage really. For example, like obviously Daniel Dubois, Joe Joyce's that we talked about earlier is on with subscription. It's on normal BT Sport, which in the current climate I think surprised a lot of people. They're like, oh, that could have been pay-per-view. But obviously the idea is that they want to sort of get Dubois and Joyce as much exposure as possible to sort of increase the scope when they go up to pay-per-view fights in the future. Whereas like Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson, they don't need, like, there's no, if they're going to show it, it may as well be sort of stuck on pay-per-view, because there's no sort of, if no one watches it, then they're not really losing out on any future sort of revenue or business from it. It's just a case of, well, everyone knows Mike Tyson, everyone knows Roy Jones Jr. If they want to buy it, they'll buy it. If they don't, then it's not going to have any sort of impact on future business type thing. So it's sort of I guess it's kind of a no-brainer on that sense from that side of things. But yeah, like I said, I'll be one of the ones that will probably, catch up on it in the morning, see what's happened, and see what we get.
Well, if you are like Richard and want to catch up in the morning, make sure you do, as I'm sure he will, and head over to Mirror Fighting for all the reaction. We will, of course, have coverage all through the night as well, and plenty of video reaction to come in the morning. As I said, please do give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and join us again next weekend for more previews, and enjoy the fights tonight.